Mariana Menezes de Araújo Costa Pinto was a 33-year-old woman who lived in the city of São Luís, Brazil. She was the daughter of Flor de Lis Costa and a former state deputy named Sarney Neto. She was also the great-niece of José Sarney, former president of the Republic of Brazil, former senator, and former governor of the state of Maranhão. Mariana was married to Marcos Renato and had 2 daughters. The woman worked as a publicist and lived in an apartment complex. On the night of November 14, 2016, a friend of Mariana's went to her apartment and found the woman lying in bed with no clothes on, with a pillow over her head, and not breathing. Police and help were called. Mariana was quickly rescued and taken to a private hospital, but didn't resist, being declared lifeless minutes after being attended to. Soon after, the police began investigations. The first police officers who arrived at the apartment and analyzed the place said they believed that she had been the victim of a crime. After examining the victim's body, the report from the Legal Medical Institute indicated that Mariana's cause of death was due to her being deprived of oxygen after having her head pressed against the pillow. Still, according to the expertise, there were signs of forced relations, and because of that, Mariana suffered several injuries. During investigations, police officers analyzed footage from condominium security cameras. In them, it was possible to see that around 2:30 p.m. on November 13, Mariana returned from lunch after having gone to church with her mother, daughters, and brother-in-law, a man named Lucas Leite Ribeiro Porto. At the time, Lucas even posted a photo with everyone together on his social media. Upon leaving Mariana and her daughters at the condominium, Lucas left the place together with his mother-in-law. About 44 minutes later, at 3:14 p.m., he returns to the condo, this time alone. He takes the elevator and presses the button from the 9th floor, the floor where Mariana used to live, while he calmly scrolls his cell phone. 40 minutes later, at 3:54 p.m., Lucas appears in the images leading through the back emergency stairs that are next to the building's service elevator. The man appears to be quite nervous and agitated. He runs down the stairs and looks upset, as if something serious had happened. Upon reaching the ground floor, the images show him rubbing his face with his hand and making a call. Because of these images, Lucas became the main suspect in the case. The man was married to Carolina Costa, the victim's sister. He was 37 at the time. Also lived in the city of São Luís and was a businessman. Lucas was arrested a few hours after the crime and taken to the police station to be heard by the investigators. He denied having any involvement in what happened to Mariana. When asked who he called after reaching the ground floor of the building, he said he hadn't made any calls, even though security footage showed otherwise. From the police station, Lucas was sent to a triage center at a local penitentiary, where he had his preventive detention ordered by Justice of Maranhão. With the arrest of Lucas and the certainty that he was really guilty of the crime, the police began to look for more evidence and try to understand what would have been the reason for the act. In addition to the CCTV footage of the condominium where the victim lived, that shows Lucas at the crime scene at the time it occurred, investigators noted that he had injuries on his body, indicating that he had been involved in a physical struggle. These injuries were on the wrist, chest, and face, and were identified by forensics as being committed by someone trying to defend themselves against him. When questioned about the reasons for those injuries, Lucas did not want to give any explanations to the police. Junilton Santos Jr. was the first lawyer to defend the suspect. He said his client vehemently denied wrongdoing and was innocent. According to him, until then the prosecution hadn't presented any motivation for the crime, which corroborated Lucas' innocence. The lawyer asked for other lines of investigation to be considered by the police. Regarding the security footage, the lawyer said that he hadn't yet had access, but that caution was needed, as any condominium has vulnerabilities with numerous services providers, employees, and other residents passing by all the time. Still, according to the lawyer, Lucas Porto would have gone to the condominium to talk about some family matter with his sister-in-law, which according to him, he did frequently. During the custody hearing, the defendant's defense tried to release the arrest in flagrante delicto, alleging that the security footage of the condominium was not attached to the case file. However, the responsible judge, Andrea Maia, didn't accept this argument. At the time, the judge noted that the accused himself confirmed that he was in the apartment where the crime took place and that he stayed there for about 30 minutes. She said that the maintenance on the prison was due to the relationship of trust between the victim and the suspect, so that as he was related to some witnesses, he could intimidate them and hinder the investigations. On November 14th, the police announced that they were after the clothes worn by the accused on the day of the crime. 2 days after the announcement, a relative of Lucas himself handed them over to the police. The pieces were a white shirt and a blue jeans, and they were in the condo where Lucas lived. The man's relative said they found the parts hidden in an empty apartment, which Lucas' father owned. According to the police, the suspect's attitude in hiding his clothes was further evidence of his guilt. The clothes were added to the evidence set and would undergo expertise in search of traces of the crime. According to investigations, after committing the crime, Lucas would have changed clothes and returned to his family to show his supposed support. The man even took a psychologist to see the victim's daughters to provide support. According to the police, evidence pointed to Lucas as the only person to have been with the victim at the time the crime took place. For investigators, Lucas tried to erase evidence of his participation in the crime, erasing cell phone records and discarding clothes used on the day of the act. He even refused to hand over the security camera footage of his condominium, in which he was a trustee, so that the moment he arrived home that day could be determined. The police concluded that after the crime, the man didn't go directly to his apartment, but to a sauna in the condominium where he lived. There, he tried to clean himself up and erase some more evidence. After the police gathered all this evidence, the prosecutor, Gilberto França Jr., denounced Lucas Porter for qualified crime, with the aggravating factors being the fact that the man had made it impossible for the victim to defend themselves and had committed it to hide another crime, which was the previously committed forced relation. Later, he was informed by the delegate in charge of the case that a reconstruction of the crime would be carried out to better understand how it all happened. On November 16, 2016, after several testimonies, Luca Porto ended up confessing to the police that he had actually been responsible for the crime. The confession took place in a deposition accompanied by 3 lawyers, which lasted an entire night. According to him, his motivation was an attraction he felt for Mariana, and which was not reciprocated by her. Despite confirming that he forced relations with the victim, Lucas said he didn't complete the act. Still, according to him, when he returned to Mariana's apartment, he saw her without clothes in her room and decided to make an attack, while the woman rejected him. He then forced her and then tried to take her life with his hands, but he couldn't and decided to use a pillow to do so. The delegate in charge of the case reported that even after Lucas had confessed, the investigations would continue normally. According to him, the objective from then on was to confirm whether the man's testimony was in fact valid. On November 23rd, through expert analysis, the police confirmed that in fact, Lucas consummated the act with Mariana, although in his testimony he said he hadn't. The crime had repercussions throughout the state of Maranhão and later throughout the country, even more so due to the fact that both the victim and the accused came from traditional families in the state. The defense of the accused even filed a request for secrecy to be decreed in the criminal proceedings against Lucas. They argued that there was a need of safeguarding the accused's rights, such as his presumption of innocence and avoid sensationalist repercussions from the media. But even the defense entering with this argument, the request was denied. Mariana Menezes was buried on November 14, 2016. Several friends and family attended the burial ceremony on the occasion. Everyone was angry and heartbroken, even more so because Lucas was a member of the family and no one believed he was capable of doing what he did. The first hearing of the case took place on March 16, 2017, and in it, the defense claimed that Lucas suffered from mental problems. This was seen by the prosecution as an attempt to relieve the accused of greater sentence. After this allegation of mental problems, the court decided to suspend the hearings until a medical examination of the accused's mental health was carried out. On August 17, 2017, Lucas Porto underwent for his first medical evaluation of mental health. Later, on the 31st of the same month, Lucas underwent a second mental health examination at the same hospital. On November 5th, the man was submitted to another medical evaluation, with 3 evaluations in total. In December 2017, the defense filed a writ of habeas corpus for Lucas, requesting that pre-trial detention be converted to house arrest so that the man would await his trial at home. According to the lawyers, as a provisional prisoner, Lucas would be in proper contact with convicted prisoners. In addition, they claimed that as he was in a penitentiary environment without having been tried yet, he was suffering from poor prison conditions such as overcrowding and poor hygiene conditions. Finally, the defense argued that Lucas should spend the holidays with his family, as well as the more than 600 other prisoners who benefited from this condition in the state of Maranhão. However, the judge responsible didn't consider any of these arguments valid and maintained the arrest. According to the judge, as it was a serious crime with great repercussions, it was necessary for Lucas to remain in prison. On May 16, 2018, Lucas' mental health report was released, which pointed out that the man didn't suffer from any mental problems. After the disclosure, the defense stated that it would question the result of the report in the Federal Supreme Court, while the prosecution said that the result was clear and that the man should remain in prison without changing anything in the process. Already on November 25, 2018, it was decided that Lucas Porto would go to the popular jury. From then on, the man's defense stated that he would file an appeal to have the accusation of forced relations withdrawn, since they would not have enough elements for this type of crime. Regarding the accusation that Lucas took Mariana's life, the defense argued that the evidence was merely circumstantial. As soon as the defense made these statements, Lucas withdrew his confession and again pleaded not guilty. In November 2019, Mariana's father, Sarney Neto, spoke out saying that Lucas was a cowardly criminal who frequented his family's home. He said the man had to be punished to the fullest extent of the law. On November 24, 2020, the judge responsible for the case decided to accept a request from the defense and decreed secrecy of justice in the process related to the crime. The judge considered that some documents, such as the psychiatric report of the accused, contained personal information about his relatives and therefore deserved to be restricted. After more than 4 years after the crime, Lucas Porto's trial was finally set for February 24, 2021. Close to this date, however, it was rescheduled for May 24th, as the defense claimed to have requested an expertise that was not completed in time. In May, Lucas' lawyer asked for the judge to be suspended from the case, arguing that he had shown certain sympathy for the victim's family and wouldn't be impartial in the judgment. In addition, the defense also called for the prosecutor to be suspended, saying that there was no justification for using prosecutors from another city. Both requests were denied. On May 24th, Lucas Porto's trial was rescheduled for the 3rd time, after his defense attorney left the session. This session was presided over by Judge José Ribamar Jr., who during a break saw the lawyers leave the room and never return. The judge imposed a fine of 100 minimum wages on the lawyer and granted a period of 10 days for the defendant to choose a new defender. In addition to the fine, a notification was made to the Brazilian Bar Association of Maranhão in São Paulo, which undertook to investigate the lawyer's conduct. The case was considered as abandonment to the constituent. After the attorney's absence, the trial was rescheduled for the 3rd time in June 3, 2021. On this day, almost 5 years after the crime, the trial of Lucas Porto began. During the session, the prosecutor defended the thesis that the defendant forced relations with the victim and then took her life. He asked that the defendant to be sentenced to the maximum sentence for the 2 crimes. The prosecutor also said that Mariana was at home taking a shower when she was surprised by Lucas, who claimed to have gone there to take some money for her as an excuse for committing the crime. The prosecutor pointed to an expert report showing several injuries suffered by the victim during the criminal's attack. Lucas' defense defended the thesis that Mariana died naturally since, according to him, the victim's injuries were not compatible with violence. In addition, the lawyers claimed that the victim had an extramarital relationship with the defendant, and that the relation they had that day had been consensual. The lawyers also said that the man never confessed to the crime. According to them, the testimony given in 2016 was nothing like a confession, and even if it were, this confession should have been confirmed in court, which didn't happen. During the trial, the defense asked that an expertise be carried out on the victim's cell phone to confirm alleged messages that would prove the relationship between Lucas and Mariana. The jury, in turn, understood that this was not necessary, since an expertise had already been carried out on the accused's cell phone and nothing of the kind was found. In her testimony, Carolina Costa, the victim's sister, stated that Lucas was her first boyfriend who later became her husband. She said that they had 2 daughters together and that she loved him, being the only man in her life until then. Still, according to Carolina, Lucas showed himself to be a normal person in everyday life, but he used to get upset when he was contradicted. After learning about the crime, she said it was as if the man she loved had ceased to exist that day, and ended up calling him a criminal. About Mariana, Carolina said that the relationship between the two was one of great friendship, being very close. She also said that, despite being the youngest, her sister taught her many things and that she was a happy person, full of life and dreams. Asked about a possible romantic involvement between Mariana and Lucas, Carolina denied that they had any relationship. She said this was a nonsensical allegation by the defense and that there was no way it could be true. In all, 21 witnesses were heard, adding those of defense and prosecution. Among the 21 were 6 assistant coaches hired by Lucas' defense. 2 witnesses were dismissed by common agreement between the defense and the prosecution. They are Marcos, Mariana's widower, and the chief of police, Mauricio Matos. The defendant's testimony was not disclosed to the public, due to the fact that some documents related to him were confidential. The trial was expected to last 3 days, but ended up extending to a total of 6 days, ending on July 5, 2021, when Lucas Leite Ribeiro Porto was sentenced to 39 years in prison in a closed regime for the crime against Mariana. The jury found the man guilty on all counts, and the judge denied the defendant the right to appeal the decision at liberty. In addition, he didn't take into account the 4 years already served in prison by the man as a reason for a sentence reduction. After the conviction, Lucas was sent to the penitentiary complex of Pedrinhas in San Luis. Mariana's family created the Somos Todos Mariana project, which means We Are All Mariana, which helps fight violence against women in Maranhão. The initiative takes the neighborhoods and schools lectures that warn about the importance of mobilization against cases like this. Fleur de Lis, Mariana's mother, said that after much pain and sadness, she decided to talk her daughters about creating the project. According to her, this way they could transform all the pain felt into something that would help other women so that they wouldn't have the same fate as Mariana. This was the case of Mariana Menezes, a woman who had her life taken by her own brother-in-law, under the absurd justification of an attraction he had for her. Alright folks, so that's it for today. Thanks very much for watching until the end. Best wishes, and I see you next time.